Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'll be sharing ghost stories and hauntings. Let's get into it. Story 1. I don't know if this could qualify as a true ghost story, but it certainly gave me pause. I lost my daughter back in 2004. Understandably, it was unexpected and put me into a state of shell shock. I took to going to the cemetery and would just sit by her gravesite, sometimes crying uncontrollably. I was so distraught that my husband on more than one occasion found me lying on top of her grave. I'm sure he thought I was losing my mind, which I felt like I was. One day, I was there as usual, was kneeling over her grave crying to the point that my body was shaking. I felt something lay a hand on my shoulder. I looked up and saw a man standing there. He was rather short and meticulously dressed. I had no idea who he was or what he was doing there. He talked to me and told me that I needed to get a hold of myself. My daughter was fine, and my family at home needed me. He said all this in a slightly disciplinary voice. I'll admit it was a bit scary the way he was talking and looking at me. I remember that I looked straight ahead, away from him for a moment before I turned back to ask him who he was. I was peeved at my perception of the way he had spoken to me, but when I turned around, he had disappeared. I looked in every direction, but he was nowhere to be found. There was no time for him to walk off. He simply disappeared. It scared me so bad I went to my car and left immediately, all the time checking to see if this person would show up in the cemetery or worse, my car. I never saw him again. The deal is though I was so wrapped up in my grief that I was neglecting my still living child. I had no clue on how to honor the memory of one child without losing sight of the other. How did this man know all that? Anyway, it opened my eyes to how I had been treating my other daughter. It took my unknown visitor to show me what I was doing to my living child and how much I was hurting her. Story 2. As I'm about to write this, I am experiencing chills remembering my experience. I lived in a house built by my great-grandfather in 1903, I believe. It's a dairy farm. I was a child. I can't remember at this time my age. Probably around 10 to 12 years old. My room was upstairs, and there are 4 bedrooms upstairs. I woke up from out of the blue. I look at the foot of my bed to the right corner. A black hooded figure. Very large. Absolutely no face, just blackness and very defined. Not coming in and out of shadow. Just there's like someone is standing at the end of my bed. The fear was overwhelming. I took my blankets and threw them over my head. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what was going on. I do not even remember how long I was under the blankets. When I finally pulled the blankets back, it was completely gone. I didn't know if I was seeing things or if it was a figment of my imagination. A week later, my mom and dad, they had been arguing. My mom was sleeping upstairs in what we called the purple room. At the kitchen table, she had commented about seeing a black figure in her room. I realized what I saw was real. It wasn't imagined. The first time I heard someone outside my family speak of this hooded black figure was on Ghost Adventures with Loretta Lynn's niece. That was the first time realizing it wasn't my imagination. Someone else had actually seen the same thing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Someone else had seen the same thing, that it was on a TV show. It really made me feel validated for what I saw. I think about it still. I still have that overwhelming fear that I did as a child. I also have an overwhelming fear that I will see it again, especially after reading other people's stories on the internet. Story 3. In May of this year, I lost my partner to a horrible accident while camping. His gun went off and accidentally shot him while we were sleeping. It was the worst day of my life. Friends have asked how I could stand to stay in the camper after what happened. My answer is that it was always meant as a place for rest and relaxation. I would be letting tragedy win if I did not keep it. While I am sad for the loss of such an incredible man, being in the place where he took his last breath brings me peace. I know he would still want me to take solace there. As part of my healing, I decided to take the camper to a quiet area 90 minutes north of Phoenix. I found a beautiful, quiet spot with gorgeous views of Sedona and Flagstaff. There are a lot of people who live the vagabond life there, or are retirees. It is a very tempting full-time lifestyle, to say the least. I quickly met a woman about my age who lived in the campsite next to mine. She informed me that the two ladies who lived in the campsite behind me would be back that Saturday evening from visiting relatives in California. Once evening came, I settled into my bed for the first time since my partner died. My bedroom is at the rear of the camper and has a good-sized window over the bed. My dog was asleep next to me. At some point in the evening, I fell asleep and was awoken by the crunching of tires on gravel. The two ladies behind me who I hadn't met yet had arrived home. My dog sat up on the bed watching out the window. I listened to them whispering to each other and bringing things back into their own camper. Finally, their door shut and all was quiet. My dog curled back up to me and fell back to sleep. I drifted off and was awoken a little bit later by my dog sitting and staring out the window again. This time he was whining. I sat up to see what was going on outside and saw a man standing only feet away from my camper, just over the border of my campsite. He didn't seem to notice me and appeared to be staring off into the distance. He had curly blonde hair and was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. I at least caught that of him as I ducked down quickly, thinking he was going to spot me being nosy. It felt extremely awkward. I figured the girls may have had a visitor or family member staying with them that was out checking the night sky. There is a light ordinance in place, so the stars are quite spectacular here. A few minutes later, I peeked out again to see the man still in the same spot. He hadn't moved and his eyes seemed fixated, from what I could tell, on something well beyond the campground. My dog was also still watching him, but wasn't whining or growling. As time went on, I met the two ladies who lived behind me. I asked them if they had a visitor the night they arrived back from California. They told me no and looked extremely puzzled when I told them about the man I had seen. Unbeknown to me, they have the Ring app on their camper, as it is their full-time residence. Upon reviewing footage from the evening in question, the camera picked up motion and recorded for 15 minutes. You could clearly see the back of my camper in the footage, but nothing else. There was nothing moving, no apparition or person to speak of. I don't know what I saw. It was not my partner. It didn't scare me because I thought it was a real person. So strange. The woods directly behind the campsite have had some strange goings on too. We've seen balls of light floating in the dark that come in and out, and the two ladies say they've heard crying sounds coming from the woods. Now there may be logical explanations for these, but it can definitely get creepy when it is so dark. After the man was seen behind my camper, one of the ladies let me know that she had done something and it wouldn't be back. I'm not sure what she did. She is from the Osage Nation, so maybe a ritual of some sort. This was back in September, and so far I have had no strange sightings of the strange man again. Story 4. I have been meaning to write about the following incidents for several years, but for one reason or another kept putting it off. This took place in, I believe, 2018. As part of my job in pet care, I regularly spend long periods of time at customers' houses when they're out of town. This particular house was built in the 1940s, and in the 90s had an extension added. Several paranormal incidents happened there over the years. Once, while my wife and I were sitting in the den, which is part of the newer extension, discussing the possibility of the house being haunted, several of the ceiling lights in the vaulted ceiling began dimming and then getting very bright. They had individual brightness control knobs, while a chandelier and 3 lamps began flickering on and off. Meanwhile, the lights in the kitchen remained on without disturbance. This weird light show went on for 20 or so seconds before returning to normal. The fact that it was multiple lights, seemingly acting independently, suggests it was paranormal. I have stayed in this house many times since, and nothing unusual with the lights has ever happened again. On occasion, when my wife was staying alone in the house overnight, she awoke to hear what sounded like two male voices in conversation coming from the space between the bedroom and the bathroom door. As often seems to be the case with paranormal voices, although distinct, what was being said was unclear. Suffice it to say, there was nobody visible there. Within 2 months of this incident, my brother, who was working for me at the time, was heading toward the mudroom at the rear of the house to leave, when he saw two figures standing and facing each other in the front of the door. He described them as appearing like a photographic negative. They were there and within a couple seconds were gone. The most dramatic incident was when I happened to be alone one morning. I was getting dressed in the master bedroom on the main floor. It's a two-story house, when a loud rainstorm got my attention. The rain was lashing loudly against the windows, and I glanced at the half-open door to see a woman quickly walking from the entry foyer to the left and turning left to head down a short hallway to the kitchen. I knew what I was witnessing was an apparition, as the woman, who was wearing what appeared to be a light shin-length dress and had hair falling past her shoulders, was monochromatic. She seemed comprised of a washed-out white and was clearly focused on some objective as she hurried past. I immediately followed this figure into the kitchen and, not surprisingly, found it empty. I remember feeling quite elated at seeing the apparition, and immediately called my wife to tell her what I'd seen. I sensed that what I was seeing was just a replay of something that happened long ago. Her dress struck me as something that could have been from any time between the 1940s and the 1960s. I find it interesting that the apparition appeared immediately after the rainstorm started. The often reported connection between paranormal occurrences and water possibly at play. Several months after seeing this apparition, the house had extensive renovations done. I remember talking with one of the workers, and he told me he had pulled out a huge amount of outdated clothing from the walls of the attic that had apparently been used as insulation. Maybe some of the paranormal activity was connected to these clothes, because since the renovations, I have never sensed or experienced anything else at the house that could be considered paranormal. Story 5. This is one of my own personal accounts. These stories are a continuation of events that occurred following my brother and I using a Ouija board. For more of that backstory, see episode 5. So not long after the night, I was chased out of my house by something I couldn't see. I tried to busy myself at my computer to not be so paranoid all the time. One day, I'm editing movie scenes to make my own music videos, in my room completely alone, when suddenly an empty box that was sitting about 7 feet away from me sounded like it had been kicked, and at the same time the box bounced off the back of my head. Not hard enough to hurt, luckily the side of the box got me, but I was startled and spun around in my chair. Saw no one. Whispered, "What the hell?" Then, to be less scared, I said aloud, "So you're throwing stuff at me now? Awesome." And left the room for a while. Another day, I was in my room doing much of the same as before, making videos that I would later in life know to be cringe. And I'm sitting facing my computer and had my bedroom door open. From where I was sitting off to my left, I can see the upstairs hallway, where if you make a left, you pass a bathroom and it ends at another bedroom. To the right is the stairs that leads to the kitchen and the basement. While I'm sitting there, I clearly see my oldest niece, who was around 7 at the time, run past my door towards the back room. I smiled and said, "I saw you." Moved my cursor on the computer screen so it didn't accidentally click anything while I got up. I walked into the hallway, said, "I wonder if there's anybody up here." Looked into the back of the room, nobody. Kept walking through the hall to the back room and said, "Oh man, I can't find you." Still nothing. Nowhere left to check but the big walk-in closet. Then I say, I wonder where she is, expecting her to giggle and give away her position. Still nothing. I checked the closet and she isn't in there. My brain still didn't suspect a thing. I thought to myself, I must have sat at the computer longer than I thought, and she probably just went back downstairs. So I head down, and my mom was in the living room. I asked her where my niece is because she was running around upstairs. That's when she told me my niece wasn't there. In fact, she hadn't been there at all today. I don't know what I was playing hide and seek with, but it gives me such crazy chills I might not want to know. The last story I'll leave you with today is one I don't tell often. I feel like if I talk about him too much, he'll come back. So hopefully this will be the last time I feel compelled to tell. So one night, I'm in my room, door closed, playing Pokemon on my Nintendo DS. For those unfamiliar, it's a handheld game. And for whatever reason, I don't even remember, I had the light off, so my room was pitch black, except for the glow from my game. I'm laying on my bed, on my back, focused on the game. That's when I heard a sound like feet shuffling next to my bed. I turned the screen from my game to my right, where I heard the sound, and practically had a heart attack. Less than a foot from my face was a pair of legs, wearing blue jeans. I freaked out is an understatement. I jumped so bad I threw my game straight up into the air. This intensified my fear 100-fold. As the game was flipping through the air, I could get a good look at him. He was taller than the tallest person I've ever seen. His waist was a good 5 to 6 feet up, and his top half was hunched over and looked every bit of 10 feet tall. No face, just a giant man. When the game landed, I grabbed it as fast as I could and held it light side out towards the thing. It was gone as fast as it appeared. The moment I realized it was gone, I ran for the door, hitting the light switch and glancing around quickly on my way out. We call him the Tall Man. Had a few more encounters with him, but that was the worst.